Hello and welcome to the This Works For Me virtual summit. I'm your host, Faith Watson. I am the director of the Faculty Development Center at Murray State University. One of the major challenges that instructors often face is getting quiet students to talk in class. And that is why I am so pleased today to introduce you to our guest, Dr. Todd Zakrajsek, because he will be providing us with some practical strategies to do so. Dr. Zakrajsek, welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Yes, it's really a pleasure to have you share these strategies today. So before we get into those strategies, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
All right. I'm from Cadillac, Michigan. That was my hometown. And I'm the first person in my family to go to college. I'm a first generation college student. Went off to Lake Superior State University. It was a college back then where I met my wife and we got married. And we've now been married about 37 years. So yeah, been a while. And from there, I went on, got my bachelor's degree in psychology, PhD in industrial organizational psychology, started teaching at Southern Oregon University, Southern Oregon State College at the time, then became university. Got to be associate professor and tenured. And then I rescinded tenure. I started a small teaching and learning center while I was there. And I rescinded tenure and I moved to Central Michigan University and started a teaching center there. And I was there for 7 years, and then an opportunity came up for me to move to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And so I helped reconfigure that center for teaching and learning. And now I am working in the medical school. So I've kind of been an academe for a long time. I've been teaching since 1986 was the first time I had full responsibility for a course. So a lot of teaching and a lot of doing faculty development.
And one thing you did mention, a lot of keynote speaking too. The first time I met you, I was working at Indiana South Bend, Indiana University South Bend at the time. And we were so privileged to have you there as a keynote speaker for our conference. And I actually used your book, The New Science of Learning.
Yay. Oh, and that's nice. There's even a newer edition now of that book. So yes, I will say quick. So thank you for pointing that out. I really appreciate that. So The New Science of Learning, there's a second edition that just came out fairly recently on that. And then that's written mostly for students. Also co-authored Teaching for Learning, which is 101 strategies for doing active learning in the classroom. And co-authored for dynamic lecturing, because I don't believe we should ever be hating on the lecture. Lecture's not inherently bad. It's the lecture active learning combination that we need. And so those are 3 books that are out. I have a total of a 10-book deal with Stylus. So I have 8 more books coming out already, kind of in process right now. And the keynote, I'm so glad, and thank you for mentioning that too. I don't really think about those sometimes, but I believe now I have done keynotes or workshops in 48 states and 6 countries. I have 2 states to go. But I think it's just about 300 now workshops and keynote addresses. Wow. So I like to try to keep busy.
Have you done Kentucky?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Multiple times in Kentucky. It's North Dakota and New Hampshire. So if you know anybody in North Dakota and New Hampshire, let me know. Okay,
great. So tell us, I know that, there are quiet students in class, and isn't it okay for them to just stay quiet in class? Why do they need to speak up? Why is it important?
I'm really glad you started with that. That's a really good point. Number one, and there's some really good stuff out there right now about sometimes just let the students be quiet. They don't have to be speaking up all the time. Just because research says that it helps facilitate the learning process by speaking doesn't mean everybody needs to be speaking, and not everybody should be speaking like all the time. First of all, that'd get very loud. So the idea is, I think there are times when quiet students should simply be allowed to be quiet. I think that's very important. On the other hand, there's a lot to be gained from sharing information. And so if a person would like to speak, let me just go it this way. If a person's quiet because they want to be quiet and just absorb information, I think to a large extent we leave them alone. But if a person would like to participate but just needs to feel comfortable enough to be able to participate, our job as faculty members is to help to facilitate that process. So I do think it's helpful to talk, but we shouldn't ever force a person.
So So a number of faculty know that there is a challenge to get quiet students to talk, but a lot of times we just leave it there, you know. But you didn't just leave it there. You went ahead, you did some research, you're actually working actively to get your students to start talking. Help us understand what really impressed you to start using these strategies that you'll be elaborating on today.
Yeah, well, you know, after teaching, and again, it was like 1986 when I first started teaching, and through the years, I mean, you teach a class, and the big thing to me is you teach your classes, but when you're filling out grades at the end of the semester, oftentimes is a very reflective time. Mm-hmm. And as I'm going through the grade book and assigning grades, there are times when I'll think, oh, I'm so glad this person did as well as they did, and I'm so proud of this person for hanging in there and finishing. But I'd run across the student periodically and it'd be like, I don't really know this student. I don't know, they haven't really participated much. I didn't feel like they did as well as I thought they could have, but then I didn't know why. And so I oftentimes try to have conversations with students outside of the class, but it's also important to have these conversations in the class. And so after you run across a couple of those students and think, I should know this young woman or I should know this young man better, then it's, you know, it's very important for me is to say, okay, if that's something that you think should be changed, is how do you go about changing it? I had a mentor one time, Tim Sawyer, and he told me, if something kind of comes to your mind, or if you don't like something, or if you're kind of worried about something, you know, you can think about it or complain about it like 3 times. And after 3 times, either just be quiet or do something about it. And so this one I had there had been 2 or 3 semesters, and I kept thinking, I wonder who this person is, and I wonder why they didn't talk more. And I thought maybe I should do something about it. So then I read the literature and started looking at why students don't talk in the classroom and ways to help them.
Mm-hmm. So these students are not talking. Is it really the instructor's responsibility to, you know, come up with strategies? I mean, students who want to learn, won't they speak up anyway?
You know, people will ask me that periodically. What's the real responsibility of a faculty member? Don't we just go in and dispense the information? If I go to the classroom and just teach statistics, isn't that really my job? Mm-hmm. And to a large extent, and I'm always careful to use sports analogies, I don't try to do it very much, but imagine a coach that just says, you know what, my job is to show up and show the players the plays, and, you know, basketball, here's the plays, learn them and go play basketball. We would never consider that a very good coach. That coach's job is to help players to understand those plays, to see the relationships in the plays, to get a better understanding of who they are as human beings themselves, and to help them to achieve things that they never thought they could do on their own. So why wouldn't we as faculty members help students to see the information, why it's important, the interrelationships of it, understand who our students are, and help our students to be better at learning this material, to learn more than they ever thought was possible. So I take it very seriously, and I do think to be a teacher means that you help motivate the student to be the best they can be. And so that's part of teaching. Content is not the most important thing about teaching. In fact, content is probably the easiest thing to just get out of the book. The rest of it makes us the teacher.
So for someone who resonates with what you're sharing today, but you're still a little bit hesitant, what would be some first steps that they could take to really get students to talk and feel comfortable speaking?
Excellent. Yeah, there's several things we can do out of the gate. Number one is, first of all, recognizing where you feel comfortable. What is the teacher? What do you feel comfortable doing, and what things do you need to work at? And nobody's a naturally good teacher. You have to work at the things that you don't feel comfortable doing. And so, for instance, if you're interested, under the scholarly teacher, I wrote a blog on this topic. I'm very proud. It's had about 16,000 views so far, so it seems to be popular. But the point there is, you go and read materials like that. Go find materials about how to help people, how to help students to be more comfortable speaking in the classroom. And part of that's to build a better community. But for me, the first step you'd want to do is kind of get a sense of why it is the students aren't talking. You might catch students after class and just get to know them a little bit. You might do a survey where you send it out to students. But whatever mechanism that you have, think about why a person may not be talking in the classroom. Now, of course, it might be that they're an introvert, An introvert is simply an individual who wants to process a little bit more before they share. So it might be that you're asking questions and getting responses too quickly. Could be that the person's just shy. And if it's a shy individual, then they're less comfortable speaking out in class unless it's a better community. So it might be you want to start building your community a little bit more. Could be that the individual has English as second language. If that's the issue, then you may just need to have a little bit more time for the individual to be able to process it, think about it, and be able to express it in a language that's not their native tongue. It could be that the individual doesn't know the material, so students are coming to class unprepared. If they're unprepared, and you say, could someone please tell me, when was psychology founded as a science? If the student doesn't talk now, it's not that they're shy or introverted, they just don't know. So in that case, you'd help encourage the students to learn coming into the class. So there are multiple strategies you can use, which we can continue to talk about in a second. But the idea is, the first thing you'd want to know is, why is the person not talking? Mm-hmm. Do they want to talk? And then being comfortable with strategies to help them.
These are excellent points that you're making. So for those that you have actually used, how have students responded to your use of these strategies?
Students really respond well. I can just say that if you're careful at what you're doing, the students love it, because students do want to participate in class, but they want to participate in class. I should qualify that. Most students want to participate in class, and most students want to participate in a way that they feel comfortable enough that they can share their ideas without kind of freaking out. If you've got a person with serious social anxiety, I can get that person to talk, but I could get them to talk in a way that they're just scared and can't think of anything else. Students won't respond well to that. But if I can help a shy person to say something and feel good about what they've said, they love that. And I've had many students who've come up to me after class and through the years at the end of the semester and said, thank you so much for helping me to find my voice in the classroom.
Wow. So I would like an example, perhaps, of a situation where you had, you were thinking about how you could really improve the number of students that speak out in your class, and
sure,
that you were able to do, and what happened.
Okay. So let me just give you the general technique first, and then we can talk about some specific students if we want to. But generally, one of the easiest things to do that kind of catches most students. So let's just back up just a little bit. If we think about why a student isn't speaking in the classroom, different strategies work for different things. So if I do have students who are just not knowledgeable, then I need some way to help them come prepared. If I have a person who is a little introverted, I need to give them a little bit more time and a chance to try something out with another person before they say it out loud in front of the class. If somebody's a little socially anxious, I need a way for them to talk, but not in a way that will petrify them. So one strategy is just simply the think, pair, share. So for a think, pair, share, I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to say to the class, nobody talks, nobody says anything and you could pick an amount of time. Typically it's a minute, but quite frankly, oftentimes 30 seconds is enough. But if you just say, let's do a think, pair, share, the extroverts, the individuals who just love to talk, an extrovert's like a person who begins a sentence curious how it might end. They just start talking. If you say think, pair, share, pair up with a neighbor and talk about this, they'll just talk immediately. So you say, nobody talk, 30 seconds. That gives the introverts and the shy people a chance to just get their head around what's happening. They may not think about the topic as much as they're thinking about, okay, I'm going to be talking to someone, take a couple of deep breaths, it's going to be fine. Then you turn to one other person and answer a very specific question, especially early in the semester. I make that question pretty easy and not too deep because I don't want to freak anybody out. So basically just turn to your neighbor and talk a little bit about what's one thing you look forward to in this class. Take 30 seconds and then stop talking. And then at that point, we share with the class. I usually will ask for a couple of volunteers first. And after I get a couple of volunteers, then I'll call on pairs. I never call on an individual. I might say, what did the two of you speak about? What did the two of you talk about? And then, so what we've got here now is if a person is a little bit shy about talking in front of the whole class, they've still talked to their partner. So they've talked to one person, that's good. And then when they report out, it may very well be the other person who's talking, but we still got everyone to talk in the classroom.
Yep.
So the think, pair, share is one strategy that works really, really well with lots of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I've used that multiple times, specifically when I'll look around the room, and I've so many times I can't put a specific name to any one of these, but I would look and see one person who looks interested, and I've asked questions and I've seen them kind of lean in like they're going to respond, but they're not really sure. And so the next item I was just going to ask the whole class, okay, could somebody tell me about Freud's, research data set or whatever? Then what I might say is, tell you what, turn to your neighbor and talk to your neighbor about Freud for a minute. Mm-hmm. And I'll do that because I see somebody who just wants to participate, but just doesn't feel comfortable enough to do it. So time for a think, pair, share.
Wow. So I'm looking at some of the strategy that you mentioned. First of all, we need to know why. We can ask the students. We can do a survey. We could, meet them after class. It might be that we need to build our community. So we probably need to work on that a little bit more. What would be something else that could be done in terms of, especially with the community building?
So for community building, most times community building comes from a couple of different strategies I'll use. Number one is you start right out of the beginning of the class, right out of the gate, is you set some ground rules for the course. Mm-hmm. And so that helps to build a community such that every community we're in has some rules and some guidelines. Mm-hmm. If we step into an area where we don't understand the rules and guidelines, we feel uncomfortable. The best example I can give to this is imagine when you go to foreign countries, how you feel. You step off the airplane, I'm in another country, I get ready to just, as simple as find something to eat. I walk into a restaurant, I don't know if I'm supposed to stand in line, am I supposed to wait for somebody? And I look around to other people trying to figure out what to do. Mm-hmm. I may not even know which side of the sidewalk to walk on. Mm-hmm. And so I look around and try to figure this out. The whole time you're doing that, you have anxiety, just I don't know what to do right now. So in a classroom, if I can start out to say, okay, here are like 5 general rules in this class or guidelines. Mm-hmm. And then what I'll actually typically do on the first day is to say, here are my general guidelines. Number 1, it's okay to question another person. It's not okay to attack another person. Mm-hmm. It is not okay to overshout somebody. If you don't agree with somebody, just talk. And if you feel like you have to elevate your voice, you can a little for emphasis. But if it gets to the point where you're shouting, we've lost the rational discourse. If you're going to come to class late, please sit in the back row. I will reserve the back row for people who come in late or who tell me they need to leave early. Don't come in late and muscle your way down and sit in the middle of the room. That's just too disruptive. If you're going to leave class early, please let me know because I'm going to worry about you if you just get up and walk out. Right. So I will go through my kind of guidelines, but then I'll say to the students, get into groups of 4 and come up with at least one more guideline you'd like me to consider. Wow. And that starts the community building because now the students are coming up with things. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to do it. If one group says, we have talked it over and we believe you should give all of us A's, I'll say, thank you very much, but that's not going to happen. You need to earn that. Mm-hmm. I've had students who have said, if we respond and we get something wrong, could you please not call us stupid? Now think about what implication that would have on students who are shy speaking out or students who are uncomfortable speaking out in the classroom. If that had never been said, but it's something they're thinking, they're not going to be comfortable speaking. But if I respond by saying, thank you very much, I really appreciate you bringing that point up. I might question what you say and I might ask for elaboration, but I promise you I will never call you stupid for saying something. Wow. I've had students who have said, if I start to get attacked by another student verbally, like someone's hostile and coming toward me just with a lot of stuff, could you mediate the conversation, but don't defend me, just mediate the situation. And if I say, that's a really good point, I should let you use your own voice to defend yourself, but I will make sure that nobody is hostile towards you. So students will come up with those things. And I've had those both have been my students who have raised their hands and said, could you please do this? And so when we do that, we're already building community. Get your students to help you to build the community. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, another question you could ask, and I've done it before too, is at the end of the first day of class, say, my overall goal to the whole class, give them paper or you can do it electronically. My overall goal was to set up and help build a community on day 1. To what extent on a 5-point scale do you think I was successful? Mm-hmm. From 1 being not at all good community to 5 being, we're really on a good start here. Mm-hmm. Question 1, to what extent have I done this? Number 2, what could I have done to make it even better? And I always ask that question. I've now asked 2 more questions. I always ask these types of things. What have I done to succeed what I'm trying to do? What could I have done to make it better? What have you done to help make this happen? And what could you have done to make it even better? Wow. By just asking that question for both me and my students, I'm showing that this is we're working together. By asking my students, to what extent did you help facilitate building community in this class on a scale of 1 to 5? And what could you have done to build even more community? And I'll have students who will say, I think, I talked to several people, and so I would give myself a 4 because I think I did pretty good to help build community, but I did notice one shy person and I could have spoke to that person and I didn't. So I think in the future, I could look for people who are uncomfortable and help them more. Say, thank you. So that's one way of helping to build community.
I really like that, really. Thanks so much for sharing. And I know you spoke about, even with the ESL students, sometimes it's just time that they need to process. So I'm imagining that basically one of your strategies just giving students more time to process.
Yeah, well, to give them more time, but you also, sorry, I jumped in there and kind of cut you off there. I get so excited about these things. To give them more time, but also just that concept of warning them of the questions coming. So for instance, I could say, let me just pick a very simple example out of psychology. I teach psychology, so it's a sample, it's one for me. I could, if this class was going on right now, I could just say, firm faith, when was psychology founded as a science? And you might go, whoa, all of a sudden it's like whoosh. But if I say, all right, everybody, let's think about when psychology was founded as a science. That has been a while, and we have to think a lot has happened since then. So I need somebody to tell me, when was psychology founded as science? And if you're nervous, by the way, write it down, because when I call on you, you may have to look down at the piece of paper. All right, everybody write down a date. All right, before I actually call anybody, show your date to the person next to you and see if the person next to you has the same date or not. And you show the person, we look around and okay. All right, now I'm gonna start checking with a few people. So firm faith, what date do you have down? That only took about an extra minute and a half at most, but it feels so different, right? So there are ways that we can, if you got English as a second language, that's a perfect example. Person who's got English as a second language, the second way I did it would allow you to be part of the whole conversation. The first way I did it might shock you enough that you're a little bit off, you're nervous, and then you're afraid if I speak and it's not clear, the instructor is going to say, what? I don't understand you. What? It's better just to say, I'm sorry, I don't know. So the how we ask the question, the timing, and keeping in mind that most of education is built for fast thinking, risk-taking extroverts. When I say, could somebody tell me? Ooh, yes. And that's a person who's, I'm thinking fast, I'm moving fast, I don't mind if I'm wrong, and I'm going to just start the sentence. And so we need to help other people be part of the educational system.
Wow.
Yeah.
And finally, I have to ask about this part, because I think this is something that our viewers might be interested in. Those that are unprepared, they're speaking simply because they're just not prepared. What do we do about that?
Yeah, so this is the tricky one under that framework of, do we want everybody to talk in the classroom? If somebody's ill-prepared, sometimes I don't even want them talking in the classroom. I don't want to sound mean, but if I say everyone was supposed to read about the history of psychology, and I say, when was psychology founded as a science? And the response is, oh, well, it was a long time ago, and I know that, boy, there's a lot has happened since then. And I would probably say, I don't know, maybe about, maybe like, around 1900 or so. That person could have just not participated because that person didn't do the work. We have to do the work. If we're going to do the learning, the person who does the work does the learning. And so helping people participate could be as simple as having a quiz at the beginning of the class. If I have a quick quiz at the beginning of class, it's not a pop quiz. Hey, everybody, I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and just read through the material so you can answer the 5 questions. If it's a small seminar, I could say, I'm going to start the seminar by picking 3 people at random, and I'm going to ask you very easy questions about the material. Psychology was founded as a science before or after 1850. You don't have to have an exact date. You just need to know a lot happened before 1850. So I'm going to pick before. So the point there is, if you go through and kind of make them get ready for class,
right,
then they're going to be better positioned to speak.
Excellent. Awesome.
Now,
well, I know that
I got to interrupt you there, though, because I just said 1850 and I was wrong. And the psychologists watching are going to be all frustrated because 1879 was the start. And so like 1850 was before, not after. Sorry.
That's funny. Oh, well, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, I didn't want the psychologists all mad at me.
Okay. So I know we could continue to talk about this topic forever, but the good thing is that you are sharing some resources with our viewers that they could continue to explore. Could you just remind us about some of these resources that you're going to be sharing with our viewers?
Yes. I mean, the primary sources that I will share are things that I've written. And so the Scholarly Teacher blog, I think the Scholarly Teacher blog is a great resource for a lot of reasons. It comes out twice a month, but there was a blog on helping quiet students to speak out in the classroom. I've included material related to this in the New Science of Learning book that I wrote with Claire Major and Michael Harris. A bit of it's included with dynamic lecturing, which I wrote with Christine Harrington. And there's some material in there about growth mindedness and how to help students to just be overall successful students in the classroom. I wrote with Terry Doyle on the New Science of Learning. So Teaching for Learning was the first one. Teaching for Learning, Dynamic Lecturing, and New Science of Learning. And then also, I just have to throw in there, I hope it's okay, is the Lilly Teaching Conferences. I direct Lilly Teaching Conferences, and there are 5 of those across the country. And if you have the opportunity to attend one of those, there are always topics on helping students to be comfortable in the classroom and on classroom culture. Always have those at the conferences.
Wow. Thank you for sharing those resources and for actually mentioning the conferences too. I even didn't remember that that's part of your experience and what you do. So thank you for sharing that. Viewers, I am going to be linking to those resources in the video description below. So be sure to check them out. I'm going to check them out myself. And so Dr. Zakrajsek, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm a big fan of the series you're doing, and all of the interviews that you have done has been just amazing. You're a great interviewer, and I think you're bringing about a wealth of information for lots of people. So thank you for allowing me to participate.
Great, you're welcome, and thank you too. And viewers, I would encourage you to share this summit with others, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of this virtual summit. See you soon.